Hello and welcome to Wednesday's Wellness Tip. I'm Julie Crane and thank you for joining me. Today we're going to be reviewing part 3 of Ready to Get Some Z's? Let's Sleep for Success. So just to review where we're at, in part 1 we discussed how sleep is critical. It's critical for your energy, for your weight and body fat balance, for immunity, for health, for longevity, and for performance. We talked about the 4 stages of sleep and what's happening in the brain and the body during those stages of sleep. And we now know that there are 3 stages of non-REM sleep, and that these are body restorative times of sleep. And we also learned that there's 1 stage of REM sleep, and that this is brain restorative sleep. Then in part 2, we discussed the 3 typical sleep disturbances that most people experience. We talked about how sleep deprivation can lead to the amygdala taking over control of the brain. We exposed the relationship between poor sleep and anxiety and depression. And we did a quick review of the 5 types of the anxiety disorders. So now in part 3, I'm going to break it up a little bit so that we can get it into the 15-minute time frames. And this first part, we're going to talk about things to avoid in order to achieve optimal sleep. And then in part B, we'll go over things that you can do that will increase the opportunity to get optimal deep sleep. So let's get started. So first, things that you want to avoid is you want to decrease your exposure to artificial and blue light in the evening. Now, fluorescent and LED light bulbs create a twofold problem when it comes to sleep. 1, they produce artificial light, and 2, they produce blue light. Now, research has shown that exposure to blue light suppresses the production of melatonin more than any other type of light. Blue light has shorter wavelengths. Again, that's what causes it to our bodies not to produce the melatonin, and the body is just really sensitive to this type of light. Studies have shown that blue wavelengths actually suppress the delta brain waves, and those are the ones that induce sleep, while it boosts alpha brain waves, which are the ones that create alertness. So kind of a twofold thing. We're suppressing our delta waves and we're boosting our alpha waves, and that's not what we want to do when we're trying to get to sleep. So in order to get better sleep, the best thing is to stop using artificial light altogether. But in our modern world, that's probably just not possible. So let's look at some more reasonable solutions. A study that was done by the University of Toronto found that those participants that wore blue blocker glasses actually produced more melatonin than those who didn't wear the blue blocker glasses. So wearing something that will help block that blue light will actually help you produce more melatonin. So what you want to avoid is any exposure to blue light 30 to 60 minutes prior to bed. So that would mean no TV, no tablets, no computers, and no cell phones. So I know for some of you that might seem like a really difficult thing. You know, perhaps you're somebody that goes to bed and then lays in bed and checks their email and gets on their social network. And the challenge with that is it's really going to impede your ability to go to sleep because of the blue light that's contained in those products. So you really want to avoid that. It also stimulates the brain, which can create problems with sleep. So again, ideally you want your environment to be dimly lit so that your body can naturally start producing melatonin and preparing for sleep. Andrew Simon, who is a naturopathic physician at the Bastyr Center for Natural Health, suggested changing all of your overhead lights to full spectrum if possible, and to use some of the new smart home technology solutions where you can have your lights begin to dim at certain times in the evening, because this will help encourage your natural sleep-wake cycles. Now, if these steps aren't possible, what you can do is, use some dimming devices on your light switches so that you can start to use dimmer light in the evening. And again, wearing the blue blockers can significantly help. The second thing that you want to do is avoid caffeine after 2 p.m. It's important for us, even though caffeine is very common, it's important to remember that caffeine is a drug. Now, when we look at drugs, we look at the length of time that the drug is in effect. And for caffeine, it actually has an effect of 8 to 12 hours. So caffeine that you may have ingested through coffee or through some of those energy drinks or in other ways is actually, that effect of that is actually in last 8 to 12 hours. Now, we talk about half-life with medications, and what that means is that once they reach their half-life, then the effect does start to decrease. So, but again, when you look at the half-life of caffeine, it is still 4 to 6 hours. So if you're drinking anything or taking anything in that has caffeine after 2 p.m., it can significantly affect your ability to go to sleep. Now, I want to share with you just a little bit about how caffeine affects the brain. So in the brain, we have receptors. So we're going to use the cap of this marker to represent the receptor in the brain. Now, adenosine is a natural compound that's found in all human cells. So this is going to represent adenosine. Adenosine is a neurotransmitter, and it's the primary sleep mechanism that causes drowsiness because it slows neural cell activity. So adenosine is involved in energy metabolism and expenditure. It's produced more throughout the day as your body does physical work and your brain carries out cognitive functions. More is released in response to metabolic needs, exercise, oxidative stress, and so the levels in the body are always fluctuating. But over the course of the day, your body usually accumulates more adenosine, which makes you feel tired and ready to sleep by nighttime. So the adenosine finds the receptors in the brain and then causes the brain to start to feel sleepy and ready for bed. And by the time you wake up in the morning, you've metabolized all of your adenosine and you should feel refreshed. Now, what happens when you interrupt this normal cycle with caffeine is caffeine's effect is increasing alertness and energy, and that's why most people take it. But caffeine actually increases the alertness by binding to the adenosine receptors in the brain. So it will find the adenosine receptors in the brain and it will attach to that, which will inhibit the normal response of the adenosine. So as your body produces the adenosine during the day, it has nowhere to go. Now, when we take caffeine, oftentimes we need to continue to take more and more caffeine in order to get the effect that we want. And the reason that that happens is because the brain will start to create more of these receptors in the brain in order to get the same response. And so it takes more and more caffeine in order to get that response that we're looking for. Now, when the sun goes down and the adenosine starts to look for the receptors, there are all these more receptors that have been created because of the caffeine. So the adenosine starts filling in all these multiple receptors, more than what we would normally create. And then we get to feeling extremely tired. But oftentimes this is not a sleepy tired, but it's more of an anxious tired, where we just kind of feel like crap, we don't feel like doing anything, and we're just worn out. And this is all because of the caffeine and the way it is affecting the brain and interfering with the adenosine. Oftentimes people will just try to balance it out by taking more melatonin, but that doesn't work. Mid to high doses of melatonin don't work with sleep. Only low doses do. So, if you've ever needed a reason to start reducing the amount of caffeine that you consume, consider how much it is affecting your sleep and how much it is affecting your brain. Now, the next thing to avoid is alcohol. No alcohol within 3 hours of bedtime. Did you know that it takes 1 hour to metabolize just 1 ounce of beer? So if you've had 8 ounces of beer prior to bedtime, it's going to take your body 8 hours in order to metabolize that beer out of your system. So when you consume alcohol, you're interfering with the body's ability to rest and restore in a couple of different ways. One is because now you've given it a job. So instead of it being able to rest and restore, it is busy metabolizing this alcohol. So it's having to stay active all night in order to get that alcohol metabolized. Now, alcohol does make you sleepy, and that's why a lot of people feel like, having a little nightcap or something before helps them go to sleep. And they do feel sleepy, and it may even produce a quick sleep onset where you fall asleep really quick, And it may feel like you get into sleep quicker, and there is actually an increased quality of the first stage of non-REM sleep when you first fall asleep. But alcohol does this by depressing the central nervous system. So this is not a natural way to go to sleep. So it actually works in direct contrast with the way our brains would normally stimulate us to go to sleep. And research has shown that overall sleep quality after consuming alcohol is very poor. It doesn't help the body to rest and repair, like I mentioned, because it's busy metabolizing. And actually, the latter part of the sleep cycles are severely disrupted. Clinical trials show that low to moderate amounts of alcohol dramatically reduces the amount of REM sleep that you receive. So remember, again, so we've already talked about how it's not allowing the body to get into that rest and restoration side. But now it's also going to affect your REM sleep, which is your brain restorative sleep. So other research has also identified that there are increased periods of light non-REM sleep. So instead of getting into a deeper non-REM sleep, it's very light. Oftentimes there's waking during this point of sleep, and this is usually toward the second half of the nighttime sleep. So this is actually when during normal sleep your periods of REM should be increasing. But with the alcohol, you're actually waking up and disturbing those cycles. So many research studies have investigated too the effects of alcohol consumption on brain waves to see what's going on with the brain during sleep. And one study found that there was actually an increased amount of alpha brain waves during sleep as compared to when there is no alcohol that's consumed. So when alcohol has been consumed, oftentimes there is more alpha waves, which remember, those are the ones for alertness. And the studies also concluded that the alpha waves canceled out any of the restorative power that the delta waves provided, suggesting a much poorer quality of sleep with less restorative capacity after consuming just even a small amount of alcohol. And another thing that has been found with alcohol is that it has been found to significantly increase the incidence of sleep apnea in two different ways. So it interferes with the duration of the obstruction and the number of times that the airway becomes blocked. So again, alcohol has been found in the incidence of sleep apnea to increase the frequency and the duration. So it's just best to avoid alcohol, especially 3 hours prior to bedtime. So I hope that you found this interesting, and maybe there's something here within that we've talked today that you can change your habits and start to avoid so that you can experience deeper, more restorative sleep. So join me again here in just a minute, and we're going to go over the do's and the ways to really help provide yourself with better sleep. So see you soon.